You mentioned earlier the word pragmatism, right? That's not really a thing in a lot of anti-racist circles. It's not about, okay, we want to get to A. How do we get to A? How do I get from A to B, rather, right? This, that, and the other thing. Okay, do that. That's not happening. People aren't thinking, they're abiding. They're abiding by a narrative. And that is a particular narrative of victimology with certain values, attitudes, and beliefs that cater to the idea that people of color are inherently oppressed, inherent victims, right? And that drives everything. So if you're abiding not by the rhetorical context, the audience, the message, and things like that, instead you're abiding by a pre-made narrative, right, that already casts people in certain roles, then you're bound to not just miscommunicate, you're bound to alienate people. And that's what seems to be happening.
When we see each other as an other, we build those primitive capacities for prejudice, aggression, and cruelty. So, an unintended consequence is that modern day anti racism and modern day DEI practices are pragmatically increasing the human capacities for prejudice, aggression, and cruelty. And that is the root cause, the stem of racism itself. So when we look at the ideology as a whole, knowing that it has political goals and intentions as well, what we're engaged in right now is an ideology that is relying on breaking down the individual and human conflict. That's what this thing is relying on. So it's really important for us right now to pause and look at our practices and see what we're doing.
Yeah, Jason, you mentioned, someone cutting you off in traffic and how you've noticed a shift in yourself. And I've been thinking about this recently as well. No one is necessarily making us respond or feel a certain way.
Exactly.
We can choose how we respond to these situations. And if we can have complete, mastery or autonomy over, I get to choose how I feel in this life. I feel like this really is hammering home this idea of empowerment. It's true that someone else was an a-hole and cut us off, that someone else has said something racist to us or done something mean, but the empowerment, it sounds like, comes in where you're not a victim and you get to choose how you react to that situation.
Exactly. A lot of people don't, when you say something like that, I mean, they really get offended, right? You don't take away my right to be a victim, but yeah, it's that's what it is. And it has a lot to do with cognitive behavioral therapy, what we mentioned before, and ancient Stoic philosophy. Epictetus said this stuff, right? There's an action, there's a belief about that action, and then there's a consequence. The belief is the most important part. Epictetus went as far as to say, like, if you're stabbed, you don't have to be upset about it, right? You don't have to. You should probably get to the hospital, but you don't have to be upset. I mean, it's. I mean, he's exaggerating to prove a point, but you get the point. I mean, we do have a choice. We do have the power to control our responses to things. Period. And that's where the interpersonal aspect of empowerment really comes into play. And that's why it's really unfortunate that we kind of skip that part more often than not and go straight to trying to get along. We should figure out how we can get along with ourselves.